Howdy folks, welcome back to part 2 of the John Deere 2940 project. Today we're going to install this head gasket between that engine block and that cylinder head. The top of the engine block is as clean as I can get it. I could probably knock some of the carbon off the tops of the pistons and the liners here, but I don't want that crap getting lodged in the rings, so we're just going to leave that alone. I did go ahead and run a tap through all the head bolt holes just so we make sure we have good clean threads, and yeah, I didn't really find any problems. There is some corrosion around the dowel pins and around these coolant passages. That's pretty normal. As long as it's outside of the gasket sealing area, shouldn't hurt anything. I am going to run something down inside these tappets, these lifters, and just make sure I get all the crud out of those. It's kind of an interesting design. There's no oil return, as far as I can tell, through the tappet area, or where the push rods come in. There's actually these little sleeves. I don't know if you can see them. There's a little sleeve in there. So all the oil from the top of the head must come back through some passages in the block. So it's kind of a unique design, but as a consequence, those are basically like traps for crud and dirt. So I'm going to get in there and clean those up. Then we'll be ready to put the head back on. Well, guess what, folks? We've got baby chicks. Little baby robins in there. See, Mom just came back. So we'll try to keep a little distance for a few days, make sure the chicks are going to be okay, but they have hatched. Okay, our head gasket's going to go on dry. Now, some of the old timers like to use copper coat or some other kind of goo on the head gasket. I don't think that's necessary unless you have some kind of, severe pitting in the top of the block or bottom of the head that you're trying to seal up. Normally the gasket will do just fine by itself. Now the other thing is, you need to make sure you get the gasket in the right orientation. Usually the lettering on the gasket is going to face up, but that's not always the case. And if you install this head gasket backwards, that's a really bad day. I don't think you could do it on this engine because the dowel pins are only cut on one side of the gasket, but some engines it is possible to install the head gasket backwards, and I know that because I've done it, and it wasn't even that long ago. I was doing a head gasket on a 4-cylinder engine in a car. It's an overhead cam job, and I put the thing all back together, fired it up, and oil just started pouring out of the backside of the engine. I mean, I ran it for like 5 seconds, and half the oil leaked out of the engine. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. Finally figured out it was coming out of the head, so I tore the whole thing back apart. Oil pan off, timing cover off, timing chains off, head back off. Sure enough, I had put the head gasket on 180 degrees out. And I have no idea how I did that because it had dowel pins, but there must have been an extra hole or something in the gasket that allowed it to go on the wrong way. And yeah, cost me half a day of labor or something, so don't do that. Pretty funny, it says JD right there, but then it also says Felpro, so I guess we know who the supplier is. I'm getting ready to put the head bolts in. Fun fact, the dowel pins, they don't do anything. Actually, this one right here in the front of the block, I can actually touch it right now. It's open to the coolant passage here. So the only thing that aligns this cylinder head to the block is the bolts. And what the book tells you to do is use guide studs, which I didn't do. But I guess the only concern really is that if you slide the head around too much, you could damage that O-ring for the oil passage back here, so just be careful. And then it's pretty fussy about the head bolts. They want you to dunk them completely in oil. We're not going to do that. We're just going to oil them up as we put them in. Also, it wants you to replace them with flange head bolts, which I guess was a later design. We're not going to do that because, you know, tractor's got 14,000 hours on it. It's been fine up to this point, so let's just let it roll. Okay, I got the head bolts installed, and I tried to keep it the same, so the unpainted bolts go inside the valve cover, and the ones that have paint on them obviously go outside the valve cover, just so we can keep all the crud out of the engine as much as possible. The torque sequence, there are two different torque sequences for this engine. One is for if you have the deep counterbores on the head bolt threads, and one for the shallow counterbores on the head bolt threads. Ours are the shallow, so we're going to torque it to 33 foot-pounds, then 88 foot-pounds, then 110 foot-pounds, and then after a break-in, we're going to torque it again to 110 foot-pounds. Now there's the other method is a torque turn method where you torque it to a certain value and then turn it 60 degrees. Those don't have to be retightened, but we can't do that because we have the wrong threads. So anyway, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and we're going to start at about 45 foot-pounds. Won't make any difference. And there's a for real sequence, but they're all the same. Start in the middle, spiral your way towards the outside. So we're going to go to 88 foot-pounds on our second step. Oh, baby. There it is. Okay, the last step is 110 foot-pounds. And I'm going to mark each one after it's torqued so I can sleep at night. Well, tomorrow is today. I guess the next step is to set the valves. So what I like to do just give them a little love tap. Make sure that there's nothing underneath of the valve before we go to set them. Next, I'll finish cleaning up the flanges here for the exhaust manifold, and then we're going to blow out these ports because we don't want any carbon or whatever that might have been broken loose to get stuck underneath the valve faces while we're trying to run the valves. What's wrong, pup? You get all muddy? Have you been digging? You better not go in the house. You'd be in big trouble. Well, crap. I found kind of a nasty surprise here when I was going to put the rocker arms back on. The bottom surface here, this is where it rides against the valve stem, and these are worn pretty severely. So they can be resurfaced, but I think several of these are beyond the point that they could be resurfaced. There are 9 of them that are kind of bad. 4 of them are really bad, to the point that they probably need to be replaced. The others can probably be resurfaced. Wish I would have seen that sooner. I could have let the customer know before I got this far into the job. Well, that was kind of stupid. So we'll see what we can do. I don't know. My dad's got a fixture for resurfacing these on a valve grinder. I don't think these ones are going to go. And I gave it a whirl. So this is a good one. These 2 here, or 3, have been reprofiled. And they look good. You know, visually they look fine. I was able to grind out all the pits. But the problem is, see how soft they are? I'm able to now easily cut them with a file. So I thought we were going to get lucky because it has this kind of swedged in insert. I thought it might be through hardened, but it's not. It's just case hardened, and that fretting went all the way through the case hardened layer. So by the time I had ground it out, we're basically down to soft material. So it's not going to work. It was a waste of time. This actual rocker arm part number is obsolete from John Deere. However, they have something that will work. The problem is their equivalent part requires you to replace the push rod and the cap on top of the valve. So you basically end up spending $55 per valve in order to buy the actual John Deere parts. So it'd be just over $500 to fix up this whole rocker arm shaft. Instead of that, I'm going aftermarket. So Reliance sells aftermarket rocker arms that are 100% compatible with the old parts, so we don't have to replace the push rod or the caps. So I bought 9 new rocker arms and 1 new cap. I do have 1 cap that's bad. And the Reliance rocker arms are like $19 a piece, so quite a bit cheaper, plus we don't have to replace all these other parts. So that's the way we went. I guess you get what you pay for. These things are pretty crusty, but I think it'll work. Certainly better than what we had. And one important thing with this rocker arm shaft, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, yeah, right there, is a hole in the rocker arm shaft. That's the oil feed hole, and it needs to be in the last position of the rocker arm shaft closest to the flywheel. So if you look at the top of the cylinder head, you'll see right here on the last pedestal, that's the oil feed hole for the rocker arm shaft. So if you don't get that right, you won't get any oil to the rocker arms, which is not good. Okay. There's a for real spec, torque spec for these. I think it's 35 foot-pounds, but there's no reason to get crazy because it's all got to come back off anyway to retorque the head bolts. So we'll just do it kind of fast and loose for now. So we got to set the valves. The setting is 18 thousandths clearance on the exhaust, 14 thousandths on the intake. This is a cross flow head, so it's a little bit kind of easier to understand. There's no shared ports. So exhaust, 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 intake, 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 intake. Okay, now setting the valves. The book tells you to roll the thing over to top dead center compression on cylinder number 1. Pin the flywheel over here somewhere. Set whatever, half the intakes, half the exhausts. Roll the thing over 360 degrees. Set the other half of the intakes and the other half of the exhaust. So I'll show you the way that I like to do it. You guys have seen me do this before, I think. So we're going to bar the engine over. Make sure you turn it the right way. And we're going to watch our valves. Come on. Boy, this thing's hard to turn. Okay, so it looks like cylinder number 6 maybe. Yeah. So 6 just went into overlap, which means that we should be setting number 1. Let's see if we can go back. Alright, watch close. See the exhaust valve's closing, and the intake valve just started to open. So that's our valve overlap. There's always some overlap in the valves. It has to do with exhaust gas scavenging. So that means that these two valves are sort of kind of open right now because this cylinder is transitioning from an exhaust stroke to an intake stroke, which means that this cylinder, cylinder number 1, the companion cylinder, is on compression. And when it's on compression, that means the valves have to be closed. So we can set both of these valves right now. Okay, so cylinder number 1 is set. That's good. Sorry guys, had some technical difficulties with my junk Chinese aftermarket rocker arms. This thing's the adjusting bolt. It's an interference threaded fit in the rocker arm, but it was so freaking tight, it actually broke. It's cracked completely through, and pretty well mangled my wrench too, so I'll have to get a new one of those, 13 millimeter. Anyway, whatever. Let's move on. I just used one of the adjusting bolts out of the old rocker arms. So cylinder number 1 currently at top dead center compression. The firing order is 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4. 4. Come on, buddy. Wake up. 4. So we just set cylinder number 1, which means next we're going to set cylinder number 5, which means we're watching for cylinder number 2 to go into valve overlap. Sorry guys, kicked you a little bit there. Oh man, this thing's got a lot of compression, I'll tell you that. So we should see that intake valve just start to open. Right there it is. So now we can set clearance on cylinder number 5. Well folks, this is not going very well. So we replaced 9 rocker arms, and there were 2 different styles. This style seems to be okay, other than I had one of them where the threads were so freaking tight that I actually cracked one of the adjusters. But no big deal, I put in one from the old rocker arm and moved on. However, this style of rocker arm here isn't going to work at all. They must have gotten the geometry wrong. I've got the adjusters run all the way up and they're still tight. There's not enough adjustment. So I don't know what to do about that. I guess we're going to take this rocker arm shaft back off for the, what, 3rd time now? And see if we can come up with a game plan. I mean, this is the kind of crap you get with aftermarket parts. You know, it's a roll of the dice. And we didn't come out so well this time. So I guess you just don't get much of a rocker arm for $19. I should have spent the money and bought the Deere parts. Anyway, let's figure out what we can do here and try to move on. Alright guys, I finally got the valves adjusted and it looks pretty good. What I ended up having to do is this style of rocker arm here, the aftermarket ones I got that were this style, had these adjusting screws in them, and I ended up just having to take the old ones out of the old rocker arms that we're replacing and putting them in the new aftermarket rocker arms, and that gave me plenty of room to adjust them. And it's a good thing that I did that too. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but the surface finish in these is just atrocious. Yeah, so you can see it's supposed to be a spherical surface, nice and polished. That's where your push rod rides. All they did was used like a chamfer bit, so it's a conical surface, and the finish is terrible. But you see, this is the one that I split from the other style of aftermarket rocker arms I got, and it has the correct spherical surface, and the finish is, you know, quite a bit better. So I don't know what was going on with the one style of rocker arms I got. If they were seconds, or if that's the best that the third world supplier can do, I don't know. This is the kind of crap you get into with aftermarket parts though. You know, you spend more time messing around trying to fit them and make them work than, you know, it ends up costing you more than it would have just to buy the right parts in the beginning. Now we're going to go ahead and replace the rubber seals on the injector return lines. This is what the old ones look like. These have a nasty habit of leaking and making a big mess on the side of your engine. So good idea just to replace them. I think they're like $2 a piece from the John Deere dealership. Now I also bought the smaller ones for these connecting tubes, but I did not take that apart, so we're going to kind of cross our fingers and hope that those don't leak. If they do leak, we'll go ahead and replace them. Okay, before we put the injector lines back on, we're going to put a little dab of anti-seize right here on the back side of the flare here, bubble flare. Had a massive number of comments in the first video about how I need to use line wrenches on these flare fittings here, and I guess people thought that I was having problems with the nut not wanting to turn on the injector. Now that's not the case. The problem was the injector line was stuck inside the nut, so the nut would not turn on the line. And when you turn the nut, it wanted to twist the line with it. Same problem you have with brake lines. So I like to put a little bit of anti-seize in there, just to be nice to the next guy. So we'll just put these in here sort of finger tight until we get the system bled out. Hello, family.
Hello.
How can I help you?
We needed to get out of the house.
Oh. Are we hungry? It's probably
It's 6 o'clock.
it's dinner time, isn't it? Yeah, you need to run around, kiddo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a little too windy though to play outside.
I know, it's nasty out today.
It would be nice if it wasn't
Hey,
windy.
do not play with the coolant.
Nope. Leave the buckets alone.
Hey, this could be a good opportunity for a little shop safety tip, huh, kiddo? So, a lot of people pointed out that you shouldn't leave coolant in buckets on the floor because of little kids like this and little dogs like this, because coolant has a sweet taste and they might want to drink it. But fun fact, basically all coolant made in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so has a bittering agent added to it, so it actually tastes horrible. Don't ask me how I know that. Hey, kid, please don't put stuff in the coolant, even though it's bad. So, not as much of a concern anymore. They finally corrected that.
Yay!
Yay for safety.
Yay for safety!
You, young lady, got in quite a lot of trouble for your lack of safety gear.
I put my glasses on. I went and got my safety glasses.
Child, we're supposed to be not putting things in the coolant.
I'm not putting things in coolant. Hey,
All right.
I'm only grinding.
Maybe I better stop messing around with the camera. I don't know. I don't know how they got here.
Action!
Action.
And just a full beer.
Good job, kiddo.
I need to turn away and turn the wheel. And it's pacing.
You can change struts out for me anytime you want.
Hey, the captain.
Hey, guess what?
Captain.
Guess what?
I'm mad.
And turn this.
This little gem right here is going to put you out of work.
Me? Oh yeah. I'm not mad about that. I'm mad about these still.
It's your replacement.
You have dish soap. You could be washing these.
I will.
stopped the ship.
Are you-
Stopped the ship.
You're steering the ship?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I forgot that it's hard to record while we're in here.
It's impossible.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Family's more important than work anyway.
Oh, totally.
Kiddo, you are not helping
No!
me. You're not helping me prove my point about the coolant.
To be fair, he's not drinking it.
That's true.
He thinks it's a wash bucket. He thinks you can use it to clean things.
Max, don't drink the coolant. We're trying to make a point here.
He drank some.
All right, this plan is backfiring.
You're not seeing their mommy? He's not like the mommy?
Baby robins are getting pretty big. They must be eating all the time because mom is always on the hunt.
I need to see.
All right, we're going to reuse this coolant. It really isn't too bad. I'm just using a little piece of a pig mat here to skim any oil that might be on the top, and then we'll kind of filter it as we put it back in. But I was just checking it with this one of these test strips. So this will tell us our nitrite charge level. So you see we're kind of basically 0. So it needs 1 pint per 4 gallons. Looks like we're good on pH. So that coolant should be fine to go back in. I don't know how much this is, but I'd say it's probably about 5 gallons. So we're just going to use 1 pint. So this is John Deere's name for it. They call it Cool Guard 2, but this is an SCA additive. So that's important for diesel engines that have wet liners, so they don't have cavitation. The SCA additive is going to build basically a protective layer on the inside of the cooling system that'll protect the liners from cavitation. It also can help stop leaks and sort of prevent corrosion within the system. So it's a good thing to have, and it gets used up by the cooling system, so it has to be replenished from time to time. And this tractor does not have a coolant filter. Normally the coolant filter will contain a charge. It'll have pellets inside that dissolve in the cooling system. But since we don't have a cooling filter, we have to actually add it from the bottle. So I've got the cooling system under a vacuum. I'm going to use my vacuum cooling system refiller. And it's kind of cool. You can actually use this as a check to make sure you don't have some major leak in your cooling system. It's been holding vacuum now for a couple of minutes, so we're looking good. This is a very slick setup, by the way. So I don't want to repeat myself and be a broken record, but I do want to point out something that I point out every time we have an exhaust manifold off. This happens pretty frequently on these crusty old diesel engines. They have, high exhaust gas temperatures plus, just years of corrosion. So I've been cleaning this up with this 3M bristle disc. It looks shiny and clean, but looks can be deceiving. So if you look right here, that's actually rust. It's polished rust. So this rust, this iron oxide is extremely hard, and you'll never get it off with just the regular bristle discs. What you need to do is chip it off. So I'm using a regular cold chisel, but something else you can do is use your carbide scraper. So this one's actually even worse. It's got some pieces of the old gasket kind of melted onto it. But it's no match for the carbide scraper. So the best way by far to clean up these exhaust manifold flanges is sandblasting. I usually just toss them in my sandblast cabinet and go to town, but not everybody has that option. Another thing that works pretty well is the needle scaler. Just run your scaler along there, bust off all that crusty, iron oxide scaly layer on there. So it will leave the surface a little bit pitted, but that won't hurt anything. If you look at exhaust manifold gaskets like these, they usually have a textured surface anyway, so don't worry about that. Okay. So I installed a new fuel filter. I'm going to go crank the priming pump, and we'll see if we can get the air bled out of the fuel line down to the injection pump. Well, it's doing something, but I gotta bar the engine over a little bit. It must be right on the cam lobe for the fuel pump. Okay, I think that'll do it. The air is bled out of the filter, so that should be good enough. Okay, now we can bleed the actual injector lines themselves. So they should still all be loose. And we're going to just watch. We've already got fuel coming out of the return line, so that's a good sign. Shouldn't take long to bleed it. Getting fuel on this one. So we better hook up our return line. This fitting is stripped out though, so I don't want to put a new rubber in there because we're going to have to replace that thing. Well, how are we feeling about this thing? Are we feeling lucky? I say we go ahead and try to run it. It's going to be stupid loud because we don't have any exhaust, but other than that, there shouldn't be anything that will keep it from running. Yeah, let's try it. Man, storms like crazy here. We had a big one last night. We had a lightning strike, I'm pretty sure hit on our property. It was extremely close. And we got more lightning and thunder outside right now. Anyway, I wonder if this valve cover gasket was leaking a little bit. Can you guys see that? It's like it sucked in on him. So, yeah. That's no good. So here's the updated gasket. It's a rubber molded over a steel core. That'll be significantly better, and it's reusable. So that's a good deal. All right, guys, everything looks good so far. I think what we're gonna do, we'll pull it outside, let the engine warm up. We'll probably let it warm up with the radiator cap off. Make sure we don't have any, bubbles in the coolant or anything crazy like that. Then we'll put the cap on, let it build pressure, get up to temperature. Then we'll shut it off, let it cool for maybe an hour. Then we'll start it up, let it build up to temperature again. Make sure we don't have any external leaks. So I don't want to change the oil now because I think it'll be a waste of time. I want the old oil to kind of wash all the crud out of the rocker cover and the top of the cylinder head and trap all that stuff in the old oil filter, and then we'll change it, after it's had a chance to run a little bit. The internet's been down all day, but it looks like my trusty old computer finally let the smoke out. She's not doing anything. I know it's got power. I just switched the outlet with the printer, which does work. So I don't know, bad power supply or something. It's on a surge protector. Actually, I had this computer since I first went out on my own. I think I bought it back in 2012. Still running Windows 7. I use it for all my video editing. Thing's a tank. I don't know, it seems to have a lot of blow-by, and it seems to have a lot of vapors coming out of the breather here, so I don't know. If we just have a lot of coolant dissolved in the oil, emulsified or whatever, I don't know. We're going to change the oil here and see what happens. Well, this is fun. Got our buddies living right here in this tray. And then we're trying to get this hose out of here. I got it loose, I think, on both ends. You can't even see where the other end goes, so don't even try. I think it's going to pull out of there. Yeah, buddy. So that's going to be your problem, lady. Need a new one of those. What are those? -8 on the ends, maybe? Oh. Nope, that's some kind of goofy O-ring fitting. Well, that'll be fun to track down. I don't know how much it rained last night, but it must have been a hell of a lot. Got water standing everywhere. So that's the big spot. But there's water pools all over in these fields. Alright guys, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up on the John Deere tractor. I hit kind of another snag with parts, and we're mostly done anyway. So I don't know how much of it I actually filmed. I got the oil changed. So we've got a new oil filter, new fuel filter. Runs good. A couple things I need to do. I got the head bolts retorqued and the valves reset. The oil change fixed our steaming out of the breather issue as well. This engine does have a fair amount of blow-by, but 14,000 hours, what do you expect? This fitting right here is stripped out. I got to replace that one. They're just pot metal. And then one of the injector lines is leaking. I think it's this one. So standard way that I fix those is just break the line loose while the tractor's running and let the fuel wash any kind of junk out of that connection, and then tighten it back up. Usually that'll take care of it. So we'll go ahead and serve an eviction notice on our little furry friends here, and then I've got to wait for this power steering line to come in. It's got some kind of a goofy fitting on this end with an O-ring in it. So they can't just take it down to the hydraulic shop and have them make it. And then my dealer, John Deere dealer, can't even order the fittings to make it. They have to buy the whole line. And it's a whole rigmarole. I think it goes into a bulkhead fitting, and the new hose, I don't know, it eliminates the bulkhead fitting some way, and it has a grommet and a clamp, and some of the parts are obsolete, some of them we can get, so who knows. They're going to order it. We'll see what it looks like when it comes in. I'm sure it won't be a big deal, but that will fix the problem with the leak. It's all coming from this hose. Anyway, we cannot get this power steering line until Tuesday afternoon. It's currently Thursday morning. You know, if they have them at the dealership, no problem, but if they have to order them through the Deere Parts Network, it's just a roll of the dice whether you're going to get them or not. And I've found that with other parts too. I tried to buy a mass airflow sensor for a Buick 3800 the other day. It's like the most common mass airflow sensor ever made. 4 days to get that little sucker. So I'll be happy when things kind of go back to normal. It feels like I'm really busy in the shop, like I have a backlog of work, but I think what's actually happening is I'm just not getting anything done because our efficiency is so low right now. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. See you next time. You know who the real victim of the pandemic is? It's the family dog. Poor guy. Yeah, he's used to having the house to himself basically all day, 5 days a week. But now there's no daycare, so kids are home. My wife's working from home, so she's home all day. Wears the dog out, doesn't it, buddy?